Hello and welcome to CBC Arts Exhibitionists. I'm your host, Amanda Paris. Socially distant catwalks, virtual fashion weeks, and couture face masks. Like everything else in 2020, the fashion world has been hit hard by this global pandemic. But it's also become an opportunity to pause and reflect on an industry that might be overdue for some major changes in how we consume and create fashion. Today we explore the question, is there a better way forward? First, I sit down with fashion designer and artistic director of Indigenous Fashion Week Toronto, Sage Paul. Then we head to Montreal to meet Skawanetti, the designer using virtual reality to create future fashion. A panel of experts discuss how 2020 is changing the way that we consume and create fashion. And later we head to Delhi and visit the studios of the designers behind Nor Black Nor White and find out how the pandemic has affected their practice. Sage Paul is an award-winning artist, designer, and leader of Indigenous fashion. As a founding collective member and artistic director of Indigenous Fashion Week Toronto, Sage Paul has become one of the leading proponents for Indigenous designers and their work. Her critiques of fast fashion come hand in hand with a passion for the artistry, expression, and stories that can be woven into every garment. Sage's mission now is to create a platform for that work to be seen, even in the midst of a global pandemic. Hi, Sage. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm very excited to talk to you.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
So COVID-19 has transformed basically everything in our world, including the fashion industry, everything from virtual fashion weeks to socially distanced catwalks. What has it been like for you to coordinate and to vision in a time like this?
It's been very challenging. The community and artists that I serve, Indigenous artists, I think are facing very similar issues that the mainstream industry are facing. There's a huge crash in the fashion industry economically, so that has been massively devastating. So really working with designers on that side of like how to make sure that these spaces, like retail spaces and marketplaces still exist, but online. But then also how our communities interact. A lot of our communities aren't even in urban centers, so many of them are already communicating online. So it was really just looking at what is already happening online and how can we adapt what we do here in Toronto to work for the designers that we serve.
The pandemic has really put a spotlight on how certain big retailers have to transform the way that they work. But a lot of the Indigenous designers that you work with were already thinking about sustainability, working locally. Are there any lessons that can be drawn from the way that the Indigenous designers that you work with practice their craft that the mainstream industry can take?
There's a huge local and community support for each other in terms of creating work and creating enough work that you get what you need, especially work-wise and financially. You don't take more than you need. So many designers are producing a certain quantity and will only sell that much. So it's not based on a mass production model, which is definitely one area I can see can change. But then that also means consumers will have to change the way that they're purchasing because some people are going to sell 10 items a month and then they have to wait for the next month for something. And someone's not always going to get that white shirt.
It's great that you brought up consumers because I was thinking about that. I love a quote that I read that you've said where you said that the two most political decisions people make every day are the things that they eat and the clothes that they wear. What do you think consumers have to change about the way they make decisions about their fashion? What is their responsibility in all of this?
A lot of consumers will say, "I'm not fashionable. I'm not a fashion person." But we all support the fashion industry. The first step I take is to know who my designers are. Really ask questions. Where are they getting their materials from? Who's designing the clothing? What's the meaning behind the clothing? Because sometimes, people make things that are very special to them and things that are personal expression, artistic expression, cultural expression that are really gives a whole lot more meaning to clothing. And so just buying things that are going to last.
You've talked a little bit about those principles that guide you, like thinking about where the things are coming from. Can you talk about how those principles have shaped the way that you work and the type of work that you do?
I was raised in a community where the community really came together to make sure everybody had certain tools and certain knowledge, and we shared those things amongst each other so that we all knew. Nothing was, I guess, hoarded in a way, like nothing became exclusive. And so that is very important in my work. My work is very much centered around family and making sure that my community around me is supported and has what they need. And it does get really difficult because our community is so big now. It's global, and so really like taking those steps to be careful and like how do I go about ensuring that the community is still at the core of that work in fashion.
So for anyone who's new to Indigenous Fashion Week Toronto, can you break down what it is that makes that specific event very distinct from any other fashion week that somebody might have heard about or attended?
Indigenous Fashion Week Toronto is like gathering with your family and enjoying fashion. All of us get dressed up to go there, and we really put thought into what we've worn, and we probably all know who's made something that we've all worn. So I think there's a lot of pride in that. Indigenous Fashion Week Toronto is also about artistic presentation of fashion and understanding the meaning behind that fashion. So it's really for audiences, it's for designers. It's not a typical runway where we are inviting buyers to purchase wholesale garments. And that creates an energy in the room it feels like it's just like a family gathering, like you're in your family's backyard and you are just celebrating this one person who's come out to show you something, or they've cooked this really good meal, and you all are so stoked on it.
And what does this year's edition look like now in this new era?
It's virtual.
So it'll be a virtual energy.
That's what I'm really working on right now, and with the Indigenous Fashion Week Toronto team is how can we translate that? We're doing 4 days of runway shows, which we've pre-recorded, and we had to do all within COVID restrictions at the Harbourfront Centre. And we'll be doing a virtual marketplace. We're also putting together a virtual art exhibition. And so we're going to digitize and digitally render all of the work that we were going to curate and put it into this virtual reality gallery so people can still walk around and still enjoy fashion.
That all sounds so new and so interesting and innovative. And it leads me to my final question, which is, what is your hope for the future of Indigenous fashion?
It's not just an industry, it's community, it's about gathering, it's personal expression. And so for Indigenous fashion, the way that we work, I really hope that we're still able to lead in showing what fashion can be and how it can bring us together.
It sounds amazing. Well, thank you so much for talking with me today, Sage.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's good to meet you.
You too. Coming up, we meet the designer creating a 3D universe that will bring consumers into the future of fashion.
I see myself as an artist first. I don't think I have a career in virtual reality. That's not how I look at myself. Sego Sewa Gwego, I'm Skawanati.
I'm a Ganyange Haga of Gahnawage, and I live and work in Jojage, aka Montreal.
Okay, sweetheart. It's like marriage. What are you prepared to do?
Me either, oh my God. Having been now in virtual worlds and represented by an avatar for over 20 years, how do I represent myself as a Native person? How can you tell an avatar is Indigenous, and is an avatar Indigenous? You know, I don't think I even noticed it, but throughout all my work, there's always fashion, or at least costumes.
Can I have the arm? Yeah. We'll see if the arm goes up the sleeve. I think it does.
The collection that you will see at Indigenous Fashion Week Toronto is called Calico and Camouflage. It is a collection of resistance wear.
There's got to be a trick to this. That's window dressers the world over are looking at this cringing.
I went to Indigenous Fashion Week Toronto 2018, and I said, I want to make a fashion show. But since I've never done that in real life, I didn't think I could do it in real life. I decided to make it for my avatars. I had had this idea in my mind for a long time. I wanted to simply make our traditional ribbon shirts in camouflage instead of calico. And then I thought, why not pair them with army pants that instead of being camouflage would be calico? It would bring together these two items of clothing that for me are very Mohawk. All right. I really wanted to have a lot of ribbons. We've seen like 3 ribbons on a shirt, that's not so crazy, but the ribbons are really, really long, like they go to the floor, and then they're jumping off the shirts and they're going onto the pants and they're, multiplying. The ribbons refer to our longevity and our resistance and our continuation, our continued life. I asked 2 wonderful, beautiful people if they would wear my outfits. They both happen to also be Ganyangehaga people.
Tell Fanny what your sign says.
Says the future is indigenous in Ganyangehaga.
And then that image ended up going into Vogue magazine online. Being Ngwe has inspired most of my work. What I've been most interested in for more than 20 years is seeing Indigenous people in the future. And so I've asked myself, what will we look like in the future? What will we wear in the future? But also, what are we bringing from the past? What are the values we want to live by?
The pandemic has forced us to modify and re-examine every aspect of our lives, including our roles as consumers and creators of fashion. Joining us now is a panel of experts in the industry who will discuss the changing landscape of fashion. Carly Stojic is a trend specialist with over 15 years of experience as a brand strategist. Jonathan Walford is a fashion historian and founder of the Fashion History Museum. And George Sully is a designer and founder of Black Designers of Canada. This panel is being moderated by Vanessa Kraft, the former editor-in-chief at Elle Canada and the new director of content partnerships at TikTok. Take it away, Vanessa.
Thanks, everybody, for joining me for this essential conversation about something that we all love, fashion. One thing that's universal and is on all of our minds right now is COVID. So, Carly, I'd love for you to talk us through the social changes that you're observing, because obviously right now it is not an understatement to say that what is happening in our industry are some very necessary and significant shifts.
I think when we talk about the fashion arts, it's intrinsically tied to retail and how we feel as consumers. We're in a hyper culture that's, consuming things at alarming rates. And I think one of the biggest things that we're going to see, or that we have started to see, is how people, eco-activism, how people are spending their money differently, and where we're pressing on important issues in our real lives and how that sort of translates into the market. So people are looking at brands that, are bent on sustainability and have ethical sourcing. We want to look at things through the new BLM lens and cultural appropriation in terms of aesthetics there. We also want to look at, fashion post-COVID in terms of protective and almost survival gear.
Jonathan, as a fashion historian, I'd love to know your take on how fashion has adapted over time, in particular in the past when there have been pandemics. Do you see any similarities happening with design now and how it's changing today?
100 years ago, the world was coping with Spanish influenza. This was at the end of the First World War. So there had been a change in the economy, and all the people who had been working in munitions factories were thrown out of work. So there was large unemployment. That sounds familiar. Instead of Black Lives Matters, it was women's rights. It was the social issue. And we had just also come out of the First World War, which had changed women's roles in particular, but it also removed a lot of the formality of pre-war life. So the morning suit for gentlemen, the trained evening gown for ladies, these sort of things were gone. And what ended up coming out of that whole period was a modern era of freer movement, still very glamorous, lots of beaded evening gowns. We all are familiar with that 20s look. So it's not that anything was lost, it just shifted.
So we've talked about COVID and its impact, but I think another very important moment happening in our time right now is this global cultural shift and civil rights reckoning that is happening with anti-Black racism. So George, you have created the Black Designers of Canada Index, which is online and it shares information about Black designers. I'd love it if you could talk a little bit more about how that came to be.
The reason for creating Black Designers of Canada is pretty simple. The Black community has been marginalized when it comes to fashion and our contribution to it. So I created something to lessen the excuses often used by the industry, like Black designers aren't up to snuff or don't even exist, which is crazy to hear or how it sounds, but it's the truth.
Did you find anything in particular, like when you Googled Black designers, was there anything that popped up for you when you started this process?
A month after I started Black Designers of Canada, you can go back to Google and you Google Black Designers of Canada, and there's only this that populates. And literally it goes for like now 2 pages or maybe and so on and so forth, which is, it's a beautiful thing to see that something was created, but at the same time, it's very disheartening because before I stepped up, where was everybody else? And I'm only one person.
Yes, yes. And Carly, when you listen to George's experience, why has this gap existed? What are your thoughts?
It's not just about saying, okay, I'm going to use my dollars now to support Black labels and lines as long as you carry them. But I think it's incumbent on white creatives to step up, do the work, and also support the work that needs to be done in order to scale the businesses. If we don't do this, my fear is that we are not setting up Black designers for success.
Jonathan, I'd love for you to tell us about the work that you're doing at the museum collecting masks. So many of them have these amazing messages, and they're like acting as a documentation of what is happening in the world right now. Do you want to talk about this shift and what you're seeing with these designs?
Well, it's become the new T-shirt. One of the first people to offer masks was Kingy Carpenter of Peach Berserk on Queen Street. She did a bunch of silkscreen masks, so we acquired some of those. And then other ones started coming up. IZ Adaptive came with ones with clear sections so people who had hearing disabilities could lip read. So that went into the collection. Hoax Couture came up made of West African batiks, which was right at the time of the whole Black Lives Matter protests were happening in June. So we collected some of those. So it's a new accessory. It's what gloves and hats used to be. So have fun with it.
George, can you tell us some ways that we can all work better to support local Canadian designers?
Of course, the easy one right away is to, support Black-owned businesses. You know what I mean? And get the word out. And especially in these times with social media, this is a great time to how do I say have the lights turned on, so to speak, because the amplification of these messages are out there, and it reverberates, and so just support it. That's what we can do. See something, say something.
Well, thank you so much, everyone. It has been such a pleasure to hear your thoughts on this important matter.
Goodbye. Thank you. Goodbye.
I thank you, Vanessa.
Coming up, we head to Delhi, India to find out what sets Nor Black Nor White apart from other brands.
Just gonna wait for this crow to chill. Hi, I am Riga Kapadia.
Hi, I'm Amrit Kumar,
co-founder and co-creative director
of Nor Black Nor White, a fashion brand and cultural platform now based in Delhi, originally started in Bombay.
We've been exploring the gray space of culture through handmade Indian textiles, spaces, stories, and style.
So currently I'm in Delhi where our studio is based. Yeah, I've been here kind of like working with our team on the ground here in the studio.
I am based in beautiful Kerala. I was down south by my brother and family's home when India announced our national and international lockdown. So I've been here for the last 6 months.
We grew up in Toronto and came to India 11 years ago. We became friends and appreciated each other's visual eye while working with the Toronto-style legend Keelan Sullivan at 69 Vintage. It was really a trip we took to Kutch, Gujarat in India when we met a tie-dye Bandhani family, the Khatris, and got blown away by the process, people, and skill behind the textile, which really initiated the spirit and foundation of Nor Black Nor White.
I'm just heading to the best Wi-Fi zone, carry my stool with me. While I'm super grateful to be surrounded in nature, working remotely, I still very much miss the special vibes and people we've created with in our studio.
In the early pandemic months, things were so uncertain, we really didn't know what was going to happen. We started discussing alternate plans in case we would have to shut shop and let go of our team. It's been an unbelievable turnaround in the past few months of our community really supporting us, new people learning about us, and overall online followers and likes that have turned into actual purchases and sales.
We want to create things in small batches like we do. Everything is made to order. The things that we create and design, if people like it, then it works. And if it doesn't, we keep it moving. But we don't have to sit on like these large quantities.
I thought people would learn from everything that we've gone through, but still pumping out 50, 60 piece collections. And it's like, are we not learning anything from what we're going through right now?
And I feel like if people don't learn now, then it's a sad situation. Everyone's had to figure out other ways of continuing and maintaining. And this is when you get resilient and you get creative through this process, right? And if you can't be creative through a process that takes away your resources, then I truly don't feel like you're creative at all.
If you would like to learn more about what's happening in the Canadian fashion world, please visit our website. There, we've curated a ton of content, from articles on the rise of loungewear to designer Aurora James's historic campaign for the 15% pledge. You can find it all at cbc.ca/arts. Tune in next time for another deep dive into the innovative world of Canadian art. Peace.